Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garr from Everyone Loves Guitar. I am with an amazing, just a super creative guy, an amazing guitarist, and a really smart business person today. I'm with Doug Bossy. He's an award-winning composer and the driving force behind iSpy Music, which is a collective of incredible composers and artists from around the world. Doug's musical journey started in Spain when he first heard flamenco guitar as a child. This sparked his interest in learning guitar and led to his love of rock and pop music. He attended the legendary Musicians Institute in Hollywood, studying with the best of the best, where every day was an inspiration. His musical journey has taken him all over the world, actually, playing, producing, and recording with many popular bands and artists. As a founding member of the critically acclaimed band The Mustard Seeds, he honed not only his guitar playing, but also his songwriting and vocal skills while touring throughout Europe, America, and Asia. A whirlwind world tour with singer-songwriter Jennifer Paige soon followed with the success of her hit song Crush. That was actually, I'm not a pop guy, but I really liked that song, actually. That was a very cool song.
Yeah, she's a great singer.
Yeah, really cool, really catchy melody. That same year, his musical collaboration with David Coverdale of Whitesnake and Deep Purple fame on his Into the Light album was a great thrill. While still occasionally touring, in 2006, Doug founded Digital Musical Consulting, which was at the time the only company dedicated to digitizing music and embedding metadata and artwork into the audio files. The company's motto, organize, prioritize, and digitize, and attention to detail quickly brought in a roster of dedicated clients. And check this out, his team has embedded and organized over 2 million cues of music across most of the production music catalogs and networks, as well as individual music libraries. Realizing that the music industry was in a major time of change, he then decided to focus less on touring and more on composing. As one small project rolled into the next bigger one, he started to assemble a team of creative cohorts to bring musical diversity to the growing list of musical projects, and this is when iSpy Music was born, and we're going to talk about all this. It was at this time Doug began to write for television series, starting with scoring the dramatic finale scene of the pilot for Friday Night Lights. To date, Doug has won 4 BMI Composer Awards for his music and television, and he's now helped brand over 200 television series, including Bar Rescue on the Spike Network, Flying Wild Alaska on Discovery, United Shades of America on CNN, and many others. Doug's boundless energy and enthusiasm make him a favorite of producers and editors who really appreciate his hands-on approach. Whether working on a big-budget TV show or a smaller-scale indie film, every client is treated with equal importance to ensure the creation of amazing music for their unique project. Doug is based in Los Angeles, California, and outside of TV and film world, he's working on his own musical solo projects under the name Doug Bossy and Echo Circle. And I have to tell you a couple of things about Doug. Number one, I get a lot of music to listen to by artists that I'm fortunate enough to interview. And much of it is really good, but Doug's album is not only amazing, it's just my style of music, so it's actually in my regular rotation. I mean, it's fantastic, man, and it reminded me of a David Gilmour solo CD or something like that. It was just it's just awesome. And
thank you.
No, man, thank you. It was really good. He's just a real sharp, really creative guy, and I'm really glad we got to talk to him. So, and he's also got the hair age quotient. He's the highest performer on the history of Everyone Loves Guitar on the hair age quotient. That means when you're a certain age and you still have really good hair, Doug's number one, man. So hey, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited about talking about music and life and business and everything guitar. Guitar really changed my world as far as just being a musician in general, but guitar especially. I feel pretty fortunate to have grown up when I grew up with the music scene the way it was then, and having early guitar heroes that I had, and just it was a pretty special time, I think. Not that now is not a special time, but
no, I agree with you, and I think the passion that you have in your playing is reflective of I don't know if it makes sense, reflective of that era more so than you don't have albums and stuff that come out like that, so I think it matches. Hey, let's just go straight down the line of your bio, and we'll end up with your awesome CD. But first you mentioned that you were first exposed to flamenco guitar in Spain, but I thought you were from the Panhandle here in Florida.
Yeah, so I was born in California. My dad was in the military. So for the first 9 years of my life, we spent I was in 9 different spots. My sister was born in Japan. We were in Spain when I was very little. That's when I heard flamenco. And then when I'm about 9 years old, I wind up going to the Panhandle of Florida, Fort Walton Beach, Destin area. Okay. And that's where I spent my formative years going to junior high and high school. Gotcha. So that's how I ended up in the Florida Panhandle. But for the first 9 years, it was kind of a roller coaster.
Yeah, that's a lot of moves. What branch of the service was your dad in?
Air Force. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So he's one of the smart guys. You know what they say that, you never hear people in the Air Force bitching that they wish they were in another service.
Yeah, in fact, I'm watching the Ken Burns special on Vietnam, thinking about my dad because he was in Vietnam, and he was EOD. He was the guy that dismantled and dealt with bombs. Wow. So actually, the song Hurt Locker on the CD that we'll get to is dedicated to him and his father, and I'll explain why later. But yeah, so, I grew up around a lot of Air Force bases and was fortunate enough to kind of see the world as a young kid in a way that when I was traveling later as a musician, it felt natural to be in motion,
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now that explains, I didn't realize you were military and you grew up on, now a lot of the questions I had about some of the music, now the dime is dropping. Okay, I get it now, man.
Yeah.
So what, it's one thing to be really vested in guitar playing, but you decided to go to Musicians Institute. What was, your thinking, or what was, involved in that decision?
Well, before I knew what a Bible was, my Bible was Guitar Player Magazine. So the Guitar Player Magazine had an ad for Guitar Institute, and I kept seeing all my favorite musicians going through there, or some of them started teaching there. And there was a summer course, and I can't believe my mom let me do it, but she let me drive out with a friend of mine before I was a senior in high school, the summer before my senior year. We drove from Florida to California. I stayed with my aunt and uncle, and I went to the summer, and it was like a 3-month course. Frank Gambale was a student sitting next to me. Scott Henderson was a teacher. And it was unbelievable. I almost quit because it was so daunting.
Oh, you mean you almost quit guitar because you were like,
oh yeah,
yeah.
So I went back and I was like, tail between my legs, and I spent my whole senior year pretty much woodshedding and practicing. And I knew I wanted to not go to college, and I wanted to go back to GIT. So I went back after high school, but I could only afford to stay there a couple months. And from there, I came back to Florida, and then wound up getting a gig replacing a great guitar player named Alan Hines in my first professional sort of top 40 gig. And he was coming out, ironically, to GIT, where he's been teaching ever since. He had won the Larry Carlton Scholarship. So my first gig was replacing him in this great band in the Panhandle region, where we had to do like Dixie Dregs and Steely Dan and all this cool stuff. And it was a real trial by fire. But I think because of my going to GIT, I had really gotten to woodshed and gotten much better than if I had just stayed in a small town and learned from the local guitar players.
So that motivated you to really step up your game.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I saw so many great players come through there, and I remember when Gambale was a student and Robin Ford was teaching there.
That's funny.
And Robin said, "Hey, anybody in the audience want to get up and jam with me?" And all the students kind of pushed Frank Gambale up there, and I watched it. It was just, stunning to watch these two amazing players. And Robin hadn't heard Frank, and he was just, jaw was on the ground, and it was really cool to see. It was
Robin Ford's jaw was on the ground.
Well, it was just, it was
wow.
really great being there at that time when, when you could get a record deal and where players you really had to play to get into GIT. And you really had to, learn, and the whole motivation, everybody was showing each other stuff in the hall. And, I feel like I got better there in a couple months than I would have in a couple years, just from being exposed to that, So it was an early, really kick in the pants on the guitar.
Yeah.
Let's see, Ron Ashtay and Joe DiOrio and just so many great players coming through there. It was like super college, for guitar.
It's funny that you said that you felt like putting down the instrument, because I've spoken to at least a half a dozen musicians in Nashville that told me the same story, not knowing I went out one night to a club when I first came to town, and I saw this guy named Brent Mason, And I was really thinking, should I be playing guitar at all after that?
Right.
Yeah. So I understand the feeling, man.
Have you, there's a great friend of mine named Matthew Lee who's actually playing around Nashville. He's one of the great, he helps run a Nashville guitar community, and they have now over 1,000 members, I think, online. But there's so many great players here, and it's pretty, I used to live in Austin, so I moved to Austin because Eric Johnson was playing there, and Stevie Ray was there. I used to go see the Archangels when they were starting. And
great band.
Chris Duarte and Ian Moore, and that was another sort of training ground, being in that scene. But when I came to Nashville, because I'm also spend time in Nashville, I was really humbled as a guitar player going down and seeing these guys. Every one of them is pretty stunning. There's a really great scene here.
Yeah, Matthew's a good guy. Matthew's a guy who referred me to you.
Oh yeah.
We've been talking so long; it's like we've known each other from another dimension or something. Mustard Seeds. How'd you hook up with the? Am I saying the last name right? The Bissonette brothers or the Bissonette brothers?
Yeah, Bissonette brothers. When I was in high school, I saw Maynard Ferguson, and there was a young brother team, Matt and Greg. Matt was playing like Jaco Pastorius, and Greg was an amazing drummer. And they were only a couple years older than me, and I remembered them.
With Maynard Ferguson, that's funny.
Yeah, so then I saw those two brothers again with David Lee Roth and went, oh, it's the same two guys. So I was already a big fan. And then I saw him again when I was living in Austin, Texas with Joe Satriani. I went, wow, it's those two guys again. And 2 weeks later after seeing the concert, I got a call from Greg, and they were wanting to put a band together. And I had been listening to King's X. I was really into King's X and wow, I wish I could be in a band like that. And they had called a friend of mine, Billy White, who was a guitar player that played with Doc and had moved to Austin to do a trio. And he was busy doing his trio. And he said, well, I'm not into doing it, but maybe you call Doug Bossy. And so I auditioned for Greg and Matt.
Awesome.
And then they said, look, we don't have a record deal or anything, but, why don't you come out to L.A. and, you got the gig, and we'll start this band. So we were managed by Doc McGee, and we, did a couple records and did some touring, and that was a really great experience. That was another sort of going to college, playing with those guys.
Oh, those guys are not. Those are serious musicians. Those dudes, man.
It was amazing. They really worked hard, and the band. I was singing kind of before that, but we all sang and did a real sort of Beatles meets King's X meets Switchfoot meets Stone Temple Pilots kind of approach, and it was a cool band. We did a couple records, and so that's what got me out to L.A. I literally came out with $50 and a guitar and some clothes in the back of a car. And the car literally went when I pulled in. It was kind of that sort of. Was
it the one you had driven from Florida to California the first time?
It was. Yeah, it was an old Tercel, and I'm amazed it made it. And so that's what got me out here.
Wow, Maynard Ferguson and Toyota Tercel. Those are two words in the same sentence I haven't heard in many years, man. Thank you.
And you never will again.
Yeah, man. Thank you. The click Kodak moment. What happened to that band? It was just like that was his life cycle, and that ran its life cycle pretty much.
Well, I remember early on reading Guitar Player magazine and Mike Stern saying, somebody asked him, what do you recommend for young players? And he said, don't be afraid to move around. So I lived in New Mexico, and I played all over the Albuquerque and Santa Fe scene, and I migrated down into Texas on the west coast of Texas, Amarillo, Lubbock, Odessa, and then I went down into Austin. So I knew musicians from all these areas, and one of the guys I knew from Albuquerque was this great keyboard player, Derek Hillen, and he had moved to California, to L.A., and he was actually, when I first started working with the Mustard Seeds, we were doing like top 40 gigs and stuff to make money, and he said, hey, I'm playing with Iron Butterfly. Do you want to come out with all the original Iron Butterfly members? So I did.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I spent about a year with them, and then Derek moved on to work with David Coverdale. And so he said, hey, David Coverdale wants to do a solo record. You want to audition for him? And then that's how I sort of left the Mustard Seeds. After a couple of years of doing that, we weren't really, getting the gigs and getting the record deals and things. And I thought, well, let me just try this. So I went off and did the David Coverdale experience for about a year and a half. And it was awesome. Learned a lot. Another college sort of music thing. Working with him, he had worked with, I picked his brain about working with everybody from Tommy Bolin and Richie Blackmore and Jimmy Page, Levi. It was incredible.
Playing some sick guitarists.
And then I got this gig at the same time with Jennifer Paige. So he was always joking, that I was in the Coverdale Paige gig because you know what I mean? Because he already did the Coverdale Paige. But yeah, so I at the same time I was working with him doing rock, I was working with him and Earl Slick and Marco Mendoza, great musicians. And then I was doing this pop touring with Jennifer, and we were touring and opening up for Seal and Bryan Adams and everybody. You know, it was really, I mean, right when Britney started, Britney Spears and NSYNC and all that, we were touring with them. So it was a really cool couple of years where I was doing rock and pop at the same time. And that sort of like migrated me out of doing the Mustard Seeds thing. Although I missed doing the band, we did do a third record. A couple of years later, we all got together, and in a week, we wrote an entire CD in a week, and it took about a year to finish it. But that was the Mustard Seeds 3 record that came out. And I still talk to those guys. In fact, the song you like, the Circus Show, that's all the Mustard Seeds guys.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, and it's a very Mustard Seeds sort of song in a way.
That's an awesome song, man. That was. I can't wait to talk about that. Hey, so let me ask you this: do you think, or how much of your willingness to move around and like kind of what Mike Stern said, how much of that is just like that's you, or like, you know, I respected this guy, and you know, or did you have someone advising you, or was, like, how much faith did you put in that in making those decisions?
I just knew that I was open to trying to do whatever I could to keep playing music. So, you know, if that meant moving to the middle of nowhere in Texas and you know, or wherever, you know, I kind of followed opportunities. You know, I was pretty fortunate that at the time you could still make a living playing 6-7 nights a week in clubs. People were going out to clubs. Clubs were paying bands, you know, good money. I was in a trio for a long time. The band actually lasted like till recently, like 25, 30 years. A band called the Electric Gypsies. And after I left, they got another guitar player and went on. But it was a trio, so we were playing all over Texas. And that band did really well in Texas, and a lot of people really support music, live music in Texas. So, you know, I was fortunate enough to sort of be open to moving around. And a lot of people don't. But I was. I wanted
it's work.
To,
it's not. I mean, and I bet that's where your military probably made that. As you said, it was not.
Yeah, I was never from a hometown, right? So I never had like, I got to stay, and I guess the music thing didn't work out. I'll go work at, you know, Target or whatever. I didn't have that. I didn't. You know, I just.
Well, that was normal to move around for you.
Yeah.
So, like, why wouldn't you do that? You know, you had to move. Exactly. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that made total. Yeah, that was really. You know, it's interesting sometimes when you look back that, you know, I always have this saying, you can't connect the dots moving forward, but if you look back and like, this all makes total sense. You know, obviously you worked your ass off, but the fact that you were so willing to do it, yeah, why not? That's what you know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Yeah. Not to take away any of the like the effort or the. You know, the tremendous amount of work that you did, but that's a hard thing to do, and I think that's I give you credit for that. That's, you know,
I wanted to work with different musicians too. I mean, I always had a feeling like, you know, I made a living for 20 plus years doing top 40 stuff, but even then we were trying to do original music, and I was trying to always jam with other musicians and learn. Like, you know, I would go see Pat Metheny or Steve Morse or Alan Holmes were the big influence for me live, and I was like, oh man, they're always working with different musicians. You know, they're always growing as musicians, and I was a big fan of Miles. You know, so I wanted to use that sort of analogy of how they lived their lives musically, and you know, I wasn't ever happy doing one thing. That's why the CDs I'm putting out and the music I'm putting out is pretty diverse with a big group of people, because I just like all kinds of music, and you know, I've done the band thing, and it's been amazing where you work with the same people and you really find the sound and stuff. But I find that also working with different musicians, sometimes not having a plan at all going in the studio is a great experience.
Is a great plan.
Yeah, Miles used to call guys in New York and go, okay, show up at 7 o'clock and see you there. Nobody knew no music was out, and they would just go. You know, and some of the most amazing music came out like that, you know. So yeah, that's one of the goals too, to move around, was to keep learning, you know. Austin was a big learning camp for me. I mean, Austin, you know, I remember showing up with a big guitar rack and then going to see Doyle Bramwell Jr. play through a, you know,
oh my God, that
no
guy.
pedal, no pedals through just one little Fender amp and sounding like, heaven. And Eric Johnson live, I mean, the guitar sound live was incredible. So it was really like being in that environment at that time was like really magical, So I, learning along the way really was cool.
He was down. Doyle Bramhall Jr. was down here probably about 18 months ago, man. And I was so glad that he had turned his life around because he's such a fantastic guitar player, such a creative person, and he it's just a wonderful show. It was just tremendous.
What a voice! What a singer! What a musician!
Yeah,
incredible.
Total musician.
Out of all the guys, he really kind of carries the torch of the Stevie Ray Vaughan spirit of music. I mean, he's really got that thing, where, I don't know.
Well, it's authentic. He's not trying to carry the torch. That's what makes him a little different. To me, anyway, he's authentic. Yeah. He's not like trying, hey, I'll be like Stevie. No, he's got his own sound from the same, from a similar strat.
Right.
But,
but he's got his own thing.
Yeah, totally his own thing. And he's just he's just a creative musician, and his last album was fantastic. And I was really happy for him that, he was able to turn his life around. Man, you have so many things that you mentioned. Like, I'm just curious to the Iron Butterfly. What was it like playing with those guys? What was it like playing In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida?
It was awesome. I mean, the first platinum record was the Iron Butterfly In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida record. So they told me the whole story of how that happened, and being on the road with them, I was picking their brains of like, what was it like when Zeppelin opened for you, and the Doors sleeping on the floor at the Whiskey, and it was really cool to kind of experience. We showed up at LAX one morning, and Joni Mitchell was there, and Joni's like, "Hey guys," and I get to meet Joni Mitchell. I'm like, wow. So it was like a thrill for me to kind of hang out with those guys. One of the stories of Iron Butterfly that's interesting is they were supposed to play at the Woodstock. They were supposed to play Woodstock, and Richie Havens had a whole career after Woodstock because he played Woodstock.
Well, Carlos Santana.
Butterfly, their helicopter couldn't come in and bring them in because they were too busy choppering people out. So I have a feeling if they had gotten to play Woodstock, I think their career would have been even bigger. But they still had a big career. But so it was really cool. I mean, it was pretty wild. People thought I was Eric Braun. It was really strange. They'd come up and go, "Wow, you look pretty good. You haven't aged much."
I take care of myself.
It's not me. I'm not Eric. But I got to play with all the original guys, and that was a real thrill. And Derek too. Derek's a great keyboard player. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, it was cool. And that never would have happened if I hadn't moved to LA.
None of this would have happened if you hadn't moved where you moved, man.
Right.
It's all like a big connecting chain, It's like your story is good.
That's a big thing. Is being willing to move and being open to move. I think is a big part of success. I think, at least it was for me.
Yeah, as a musician, for sure. Yeah, I think Hey, so like, I'm not 100% sure, but when I read your bio, to me it seemed like digital music consulting. I call that your KFC recipe, because that was, at least as an outsider looking in, the recipe for KFC is worth a lot of money. And it would seem like what you did was that thing for you. So if you could explain in layman's terms what the company did, and then what series of events led up to you creating this company, because I think it's brilliant, man.
Sure, yeah. It was actually accidental, but very cool the way it all worked out. So production music, was basically started on records, LPs, when people needed to license music for everything from TV shows to commercials to whatever. There were literally reps with record players walking around with records.
Really?
And there was a couple, and they would, you could license a piece of music for whatever you needed. And then it went from that to CDs. And so there was, by then, I started going to the NAB show, working at a company called 5 Alarm Music as a music. I was doing a little composing, but mostly working as a music supervisor / librarian. They had bought all this music and had this quality problem of trying to get all the CDs digitized. And a company out of Toronto called SoundMiner had made an application, piece of software that actually allowed you to digitize the CD and put in metadata into the files that would be scanned and read by Pro Tools and iTunes and SoundMiner itself and other search apps. So
Explain real quick if you can the metadata. I mean, I know what
Yeah,
it is, but
sure. So the metadata means if you have a piece of music, like who's the composer, who's the publisher, what's the track title, what's the description, what kind of category of music is it, what's the mood, what's the tempo, what's the BPM, all that's metadata, data. And now you can bury that in with the file and then send it off to a music supervisor and go, here's my song. She could throw it into iTunes and go, oh, it's by you, it's country, whatever. I'm looking for something that sounds like this. So that whole business of organizing and digitizing music hadn't been done. I did it for that company I worked for, and then based from that, we went to the NAB show, and a lot of the other catalogs kind of huddled around and said, how'd you do that? And the owner of the company was a great friend, or the running the company, Cassie Lord, said, why don't you start your own company? So I said, great. So it enabled me to kind of step away and work for myself for a couple of years. And we hired a team of people, and we digitized tons of CDs, and we were listening to music and doing the metadata. We did like 25,000 cues for Nat Geo, all their old TV shows, and we were doing for 4 or 5 years pretty much most everybody out there. We were consulting or digitizing and organizing music, which allowed me to sort of see the Library of Congress of production music as a global bird's eye view. It was really interesting. And as a guitar player, I would hear stuff and go, I could do that. Or, so it kind of led into the composing world from going, oh, there's this other angle to make money and to have fun in music creatively. And that's what sort of the DMC, the Digital Music Consulting, sort of opened my relationships up with everybody in town, and also allowed me to step into the next role, which was composing.
Is that company still around, or is it like has fulfilled its mission and now there's different ways of putting in
Yeah, it has. I mean, if you look at it like washing the car, we washed a lot of cars and waxed a lot of cars.
Yeah.
After a while, I want to build the cars. I want to get into the car manufacturing. We still do it for some clients, but it's slowed down because after a while, after you do the organizing for someone and they know how to organize it, then they can buy the tools and do it themselves. So honestly, after time, it was great to do at the time, and we still do it, but it's not our main focus now. Our main focus is actually creatively making and composing music for custom shows,
I would imagine when this first got started, it must have been like you couldn't hire enough people and get enough stuff. I couldn't imagine how did you even process? Like you'd have to put individual tracks in and rip them, basically?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, we had stacks.
Holy crap.
Yeah, we had stacks of Mac Minis, and we were just ripping CDs all day long. I mean, literally getting boxes of hundreds of CDs at a time and, managing all the metadata. It was a huge job.
Man, I've done that for my own bootleg collection, let alone like, a couple of million. I'm just like, it's mind-boggling how you process all that, man.
I was pretty fortunate too. I had great parents that were very organized, and so I sort of got the organizing gene, I guess.
Yeah.
You have to be pretty organized to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I would imagine because you've done so many different things and you've done them well. I would just take for granted that you're organized. You can't do. I don't know. You can do some things, but you can't do a bunch of things really well if you're totally disorganized. It's my experience anyway.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay. iSpy Music. How did you get involved with it, and really what is it, and what's your role in the organization?
Sure. So iSpy Music is my company that does music composing, work for hire mostly, but we also have music that we represent. But I started, I was working for that company, and I had the opportunity to write music for the pilot episode of Friday Night Lights. And I had lived in Odessa, and I remember the movie. I'm a big fan of Peter Berg. And Snuffy Walden, who's done a ton of great shows, Wonder Years, and he actually did the show Friday Night Lights. He was doing the show, but for some reason the music, they wanted some sort of explosions in the sky. Long story short, I scored this scene, which is like an 8-minute football scene, and I got really emotional because it was a fourth dimension to music. For the first time, I'm actually making music, and you're like this hidden character, and you're affecting the scene, and I really was like, wow, I want to do this. So I started putting the feelers out, and there was a show that came up. It was an ABC show called Find My Family, and they were trying to cut it with a library, and it wasn't working. So I had a couple of friends that were composers, and I told the company that was doing the show, I said, give me the show. It was a Friday. I'll tackle this over the weekend. It was a whole hour. So me and a couple buddies just chopped it up and scored the whole thing. We didn't sleep over the weekend. Showed up Monday. The company said, "Great, this is awesome. You got the show." And
awesome.
we have these other 4 shows. So overnight I had all this work. And I didn't want to put my name on the company because it wasn't me exclusively writing. And so I thought, well, I remember The Matrix was a cool name. It was a production team that did Avril Lavigne and other people, and I didn't know who they were. But I thought I should come up with a name for this company to where I could be flexible in who I bring in and out. And so I came up with iSpy Music, and that's how we started with that ABC show. And then it turned into, now it's over a couple hundred television series now, and I've had, upwards of, at one time, 80 people across the country writing in virtual studios at home, and I'm kind of managing and writing at the same time.
How do you find these guys?
Friends of friends sometimes, and once we got more popular, people would, email me directly and say, "Hey, here's my reel," or "Here's what I do," and so it kind of grew from there. And we really experienced an amazing 9-year, 10-year run in when reality and documentary and television was really exploding that way before Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and all that started popping out. It's interesting. I mean, we've been really blessed to have as much work as we've had, and I was really, from being a band guy and being a musician, a fan of music, I was really a stickler on who I sort of had come in and work with us. So I wanted to make sure if a guy was a great dobro guitar player, I wasn't going to have him try to write an orchestral cue. And if a guy was a great orchestral guy, I wasn't going to hand him a EDM electronica thing.
Sure.
So that's how it kind of started. But that's what iSpy Music is. And, we're still doing a ton of TV work, and it allows me creatively to sort of get up in the morning. And in the beginning, I had to write whatever was on the plate. Now I can kind of choose what I want to write, which is kind of nice.
So you could cherry pick the jobs you want because iSpy's got a bunch of stuff coming in and out all the time, and you can give the stuff you don't want or to other people that are more suited to write that thing for skill set. Yeah, that's really cool. So
it's like a band, that way.
Let me ask you this. When that weekend, when they said, "Hey, man, we want you to do this full hour score," my question is, what prompted you to, instead of saying, "Okay, I'm going to go back and do it," you pulled other people in? Was that because you always just write with other people, or, because you could have just sat and done it yourself, and the whole destiny of iSpy could have been, you and, a secretary.
Right.
Instead of a bigger company you've been able to scale.
Yeah, it's a good question. I wanted to, first of all, I had so much work I couldn't do it myself. And B, I didn't want to do it myself because I was good at that time at certain things, but I wasn't good at everything. And that was the same for a lot of other composers. So interesting, like Hans Zimmer is amazing when he sits down and does what he does, but he now has a team. All the film composers, for the most part, have a team behind them helping them. And, I was interested in suddenly the business side of it, and I was also interested in the creative side of it. So as I went on to get more work, and the producers that worked with us moved on and did other things, it was always fun for me to do the part where I could go down and meet with the editors and talk creatively, and then talk to the team like a band and go, "Okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. You do this, you do that." I like that part. I didn't want to be the guy that was being stressed out of my mind on Sunday night having to do everything, and then I couldn't grow the company that way. And really, it's like a big profit-sharing company. So it felt good, on the quarterly income statements that I would get calls or emails from the guys, and everybody was like, "Wow, man, awesome! I could pay my credit cards off, or I bought a house, or whatever." It's like that was a great feeling. So I felt like by not wanting to keep the pie to myself, I was actually blessed more by kind of handing out the work. And to me, it was fun. I mean, I learned so much and got better as a composer from working with different guys. I would go, "Wow, your cue sounds so good. What are you using for mastering?" Or, "What is that string sound?" Or, suddenly it was a collective. And when I was trying to do it as my own guy, I felt more isolated. And I didn't like that. I was always a band guy. I was always used to being in a scenario where I'd show up and be in a band working with musicians. So it felt natural to want to expand and work with people creatively in a group effort than to be the one guy that puts my name on it, and that's me,
I give you a lot of credit. That's a mistake I've made early on in my career, is not doing stuff like that, and it's a big mistake, quite frankly, because you can't scale. You need a team to do that, and I give you a lot of credit for doing that. Before we talk about your album, is there anything else apart from that you're working on now that you're excited about?
Yeah, two things. One is I've replaced Steve Lukather in a fusion band that was pretty popular called the Los Lobotomies, and that's all the original members. Well, original members was actually Jeff Porcaro, who's passed away sadly, but the latest lineup is David Garfield on keyboards, John Pena on bass, Lenny Castro on percussion, and Chad Wackerman on the drums. And so, because the spirit of the band was very much, it got guest guitar players, it's been a dream for me. The record's coming out next year.
It's recorded. Yeah. It's recorded already.
We're recording. Yeah, I got
That's
to co-write
awesome.
and record 9 songs with them. And the guests on the record are, so far, Randy Brecker, Joe Bonamassa, Guthrie Govan, Tim Miller, Scott Anderson, Robin Ford, Frank Cabali. I mean, all my, favorite guitar players.
That's a pretty cool group of people to be playing guitar with, man.
Yeah, Will Lee just played on it. I mean, it's going to be very, very cool. And it's going to run the scope of really cool, heavy rock, fusion to Latin to, we're doing a tribute to Paco de Lucia, Michael Brecker, Alan Holsworth was supposed to play on it. Sadly, he passed away. So we're doing a tribute to him. We got Lyle Workman on the CD.
Oh, cool, man.
Amazing guitar player.
Yeah.
And musician. So, yeah, for me, it's a dream come true. If you'd gone back to my 18-year-old, being a GIT, sitting next to Frank and Scott going, I got to quit, to being, fast forward and I get to be on a record with the two guys. It's a pretty big thrill.
That's awesome.
So doing that, and then also because I lived in New Mexico and Texas and Florida, I've now been planning to go back, and I just finished one in Florida, to go back to gather my local musicians that I grew up with or played there with, and I'm doing some more Echo Circle stuff with them.
Very cool.
So it's kind of like full circle for me, and being able to, back then I was in some really great bands with different musicians, and nobody saw that outside of the local town that we were in. So now I get to go back, record with them in a nice studio, do original songs with them, and put it out and have everybody, hear these different lineups or different musicians that I played with in the past. So that's really, for me, very exciting. And it's been a great musical hang with some of my old friends I haven't seen in a while,
So, which of those guys on the Echo Circle Volume 1, which of those guys did you grow up with in Florida?
None of them on the Echo Circle 1.
Okay.
Chapter 1, yeah.
Yeah, because I know all those names. I'm like, those guys are all from the Panhandle? What the hell?
No, yeah. Echo Circle was the street I grew up on and learned how to play guitar. Okay. So I wanted to mean, when I did the solo record, I wanted to mean echoing all my music influences with a circle of friends. And ironically, it was Echo Circle I grew up on. So that's what it means. And so I was reaching out to, musicians that I wanted to work with or had worked with to do the first CD in a variety of styles, so it wasn't the same thing throughout the whole. Because I didn't want to be a blues guy or a country guy or a rock guy or a pop guy. I wanted to be free, to do whatever. So with the one single thread being my voice through the whole thing. So that's been the fun part of the Echo Circle. And I wanted to do a musical diary. Initially, I was going to do a song a week with a video a week, and then I realized,
shit.
Okay, that's too much.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I'm too busy doing other stuff too. So I thought, well, I'll put out once a year. I'll put out a musical diary, and so that's why it's called Chapter 1. I'm working on Chapter 2 now, and then next year will be Chapter 3, on and on. So I want it to be like a volume series of a body of work of vocal songs that could be in any style, influenced by anything, and with different musicians. And it's really fun. It's been a really cool project. And now I'm doing some instrumental stuff, and then the Lobotomies stuff will show the more fusion side and what I can do. But for all the songs and the songwriters and the stuff I love to listen to, I now have a vehicle to kind of put that out. And there's been a lot of great things that have happened from putting the CD out. So, for example, I did a song called We Ride Again, and it's dedicated to the American Indian movement. Ever since I was a kid, I'm not part of Native American I'm half Italian, half Portuguese, but I was always attracted and drawn to the Native American culture. So I wrote this song called We Ride Again, dedicated to the American Indian movement. And I sent it off to, .org, never thinking I'd hear back. And a woman named Dorothy Ninham called me, and her husband was one of the co-founders of the American Indian movement. We started talking for like an hour on the phone, which led to, well, how can I help? And she said, well, Pine Ridge is super, it's like one of the poorest regions in the country. These kids don't have any music program. So I started calling Sweetwater and DW drums and Taylor guitars and Marcus Miller basses, and we raised $40,000 worth of instruments and brought them to the schools on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And Dennis Banks, who's one of the four, the fathers of the American Indian movement, came out with us and spent 10 days out there. It was like just an amazing trip for me.
Where is this Pine Ridge? Where is this?
Pine Ridge is in South Dakota.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, so, because of that song that led to that sort of, the first song on the record, it's called Wonderland, and a friend of mine has a daughter that was suffering from OCD at the time, to the point where she was being hospitalized, and OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder, and it was really bad. She couldn't write her name. She was really having a hard time. So I wrote this song called Wonderland and asked her to be Alice in the video. I played the Mad Hatter because I was a big Tom Petty fan, and I wrote the song kind of like Kevin Gilbert, which I'm a huge fan of, and it was kind of like, we're all mad here, So she plays very quietly. She plays Alice in the video and starts showing her friends. And from what I understand, like a month or two later, she went into the kitchen and wrote her name down for the first time. And now it's been about 2 years. She's now leading a normal life. And I don't know, maybe the song was an instrument in sort of helping.
In healing. At least it led her. Man, if all it did was open the door, that's
right.
One. I mean, that's all you need to do is open a door, man, for someone to get progress,
Yeah, so
that's really cool.
And I had a friend of mine from high school, why the record is sort of leaning towards a couple military songs is I had two songs that were military songs. One was a jam that I had done with a friend of mine, Andy Sinisi, great drummer.
Oh, my God, yeah.
We just got together and jammed, and it became the song, which I thought, this would be a great song about the unknown soldier. So we wrote that first, and then after I saw the movie Hurt Locker, I wrote that for my dad and grandfather, which I'll explain. So that was the two songs I was working on. And then a friend of mine called me and said, look, I'm working with this company that is working with vets that have PTSD that are coming back from, there's a lot of suicide. Can we have you write a song dedicated to them and come down and play it in front of the vets in Austin, Texas? And I hadn't been back to Austin in 20 years. So I wrote Fog of War for them. And that became a really cool, like, I got to go down, it was pretty emotional, and sing it in a room full of veterans. And so that song became a song because my friend from high school saw what I was doing with the early, the very first song I put out was for Glenn Campbell. At the time, he was still alive, suffering from Alzheimer's. So I did that song, 12th and Never, for him, recorded it in Nashville, and, reached out to his family and sent him the song. And, I started doing a song and a video. There was no CD. It was just videos on a YouTube channel. And then I was watching the circus show on Showtime, and the election was so crazy, I decided to write a song kind of inspired by the circus show called Clown Car about the election, and it's kind of like the theory of it was no matter who wins, we all lose. So I just wanted to make, kind of, because everybody's so serious about it, and I just wanted to kind of go, well, it's a crazy election and this crazy time in the world. So yeah, the CD has allowed me to.
A lot of good things have happened to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a very cool thing. So I've gotten sort of paid in a different way back from it, and that's kind of like it's part of the inspiration for moving forward to do it.
Yeah.
Working on a couple new ones now. Another 8 or 9 songs, but I could tell you 2 of them that I'm about to release. One's called Memento Mori. It's I reached out to Kenny Arnoff, great drummer I've always wanted to work with. So Kenny and James Lomenzo, great bass player, and I co-wrote the song called Memento Mori, which is Latin for Remember We All Die, and it's a dedication to Chris Cornell, Lane Staley, all the guys that passed away from the grunge era. And it's very much a super unknown Soundgarden kind of track. That's going to be cool. That's coming out soon. And then I'm doing another one called Wonderful World, which is dedicated to the late, great Louis Armstrong, the first star of jazz. And it's not his song. It's a song I wrote called Wonderful World. And the video is going to be all black and white footage of Louis and about Louis. And then at the end of the song, as I sing What a Wonderful World, we're going to transition to like the Vegas shooting and, you know, Barcelona riots. And as I keep singing What a Wonderful World, it's coming out pretty cool.
That's pretty intense, man.
Yeah, so I get to kind of like, you know, put the videos out and sort of affect how the listener is affected by the song with a visual story, like a mini movie, which is pretty fun. And then I get to put the CD out when all 10 songs are done or whatever.
Wow.
And have you just listen to it like a musical diary, really, you know, like a trip.
Let's talk more about this record because it's awesome. Okay, so you made a comment earlier. You said it's very diverse. One of the things that really turned me on about it was oftentimes a solo artist will put out a record like this, but it's so diverse, it doesn't necessarily fit together.
Right.
Right? Like you have a little flamenco on there. You have a kind of a country. You have a lot of rock, like some stoner rock stuff. Everything goes together, man. It's just like, you know.
Wow, thanks.
Yeah. That's what was really turned me on about it because I was listening to it and I was like, man, this is really. Because, you know, I'm not like a record critic or anything, but I like music a lot. And I always try to listen and understand like what's this guy thinking about when he's doing this. And it's hard to do. It's hard to put out a flamenco record and a country record and a flamenco song, a rock song. And like, that's not easy to do. It's like serving, you know, Mexican food, Italian food and Russian food, making it in one meal. That's not easy, you know, but that's one of the things I liked about this.
Well, remember the Beatles too. I mean, the Beatles by the fourth, fifth records, you know, it was very diverse, but it was always this thread of their voice, you know. So the other thing too, I'll say, I had he's a great friend now, but he's a great engineer, producer, mixer, you know, he does everything. But I had the guy, Tony Phillips, mix everything. So I had one mixer and one person mastering everything. So having that set of ears on everything sort of gave it a glue, if that makes sense. Yeah,
totally. Absolutely. Yeah, because it keeps it within the same house at least, you know?
Right.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, that makes, and was this done in a proper studio or is it like, not that a home studio is not a proper studio, but you listen to it, it sounds like.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you know. It was done at my studio, which I call Beautiful Noise Studios in California. But I also recorded like two of the Supergirl song and the country song 12th and Never was recorded in Nashville at a great place called Watershed Studios. So, but for the most part, you know, it was done at my studio.
Great job. Phenomenal.
Thanks. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
And so, I mean, you know, I think getting someone to, you know, help with the engineering. I don't engineer like drums, for example. I always got help from Tony on that stuff. But, you know, writing the songs and being the guitar player on it, although I had other guitar players too, I think that's the glue that sort of, you know, and the style of, like, I'm a huge Joni Mitchell fan and Kevin Gilbert and Peter Gabriel. You know, they'll have these records where they don't really go from country to, well, actually Sting has, but they have this really, it's like each song is a story. And now the attention spans are so short that people aren't listening to a whole record anymore. So that was the interesting thing about putting out.
I don't think that's your audience, though.
Yeah, and putting out a song and a video every couple months or every month or whatever it was allows you to digest it in a small bite. And then if you get the record and you listen to it all at once, then it's sort of like, oh, wow, you know, it's kind of a neat journey. But, you know, the intention is to sort of have a discussion for each song or an idea for each song, like Joni did, you know. She's a huge inspiration, and not that I'll ever be like that, but, you know, I always loved, you know, you could just read the lyrics from her songs, and I've bought books of her lyrics as books, you know, and they're equally as enjoyable as the music without even hearing the music. So that's what I continue to strive for, is try to get better at writing lyrics and singing better and producing and writing better. And And the TV stuff, ironically, has helped me be able to write more diversely.
Oh my God, yeah. You're like a studio musician, a session writer. You're a session writer basically. Instead of a session guitar player, you're a session writer basically.
Yeah, it's been pretty neat, and I'm always learning. I mean, full circle, I'm back to listening to flamenco now again, and I'd love to take a year or two off and just try to learn that. I don't really play flamenco style, but so the album is pretty diverse. So I'm always a fan of. There's so much music now out there. I mean, we all kind of collectively grew up listening to the same music, and it's really strange when you're at a mall or you're at a hotel and you hear the same sort of like music stop from the 80s to the 90s kind of thing, because they keep playing that stuff over and over, and you'll hear Zeppelin and all that stuff. It's like the new classical music is the music we grew up on.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much, you know what I mean?
Very true.
So there's so much music now happening that you and I will never have enough time in our lifetime to hear it all.
No.
But there's new bands like Snarky Puppy and Dirty Loops and Jason. I can't remember his last name. He won the Grammy. Amazing. There's so much music out there. So it's a great time for music fans. Because all the stuff is out there. So yeah, I guess it's my way of trying to put stuff out there and having people enjoy it, in my limited sort of space.
Hey, this is Craig Garber, and thanks for listening to the first part of this awesome conversation with Doug Bossy. In part 2, which is episode 94, Doug is going to share the backstory of the songs on his newest CD, which is called Chapter 1, including how he came up with the lyrics and how he put the songs together, both musically and production-wise. He's going to share with us the advice that he'd go back and give his younger self if he could do that, and a lot of other candid personal reveals in the second half of this conversation. So again, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you on the next episode. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.